Welcome back to Light the Fuse, and our visual effects marathon continues.
Yes, it does.
Drew Taylor, joined by Charles Hood.
Hello.
And this
You're mixing up the intros.
Mixing it up.
I like it.
Yeah, you like that energy?
Yeah.
I just had a quesadilla, so I'm feeling very peppy. Yeah.
I feel like it's also because we've run out of things to say.
I really have. When
Hard.
Charles looks at me blank-faced, waiting for me to come up with something, it's a lot of pressure.
Well, I always have to cut the pause out.
Yeah.
Or we have Luke cut the pause out, depending on who's editing that episode.
Yeah. So, we're continuing this week with Todd Vaziri, who, beyond being like a visual effects guru and one of our favorite guests so far, is a great presence on Twitter. I can't stress enough to follow him on Twitter. He has yet to follow me back personally, so
okay. You're personally offended.
We'll put that aside for now.
Yeah.
But he does these great kind of breakdowns of different techniques and tricks and magic. I mean, that's the only thing,
and he stands up for the rights of visual effects artists.
Always.
Because I think I've even been guilty of this in the past, of sort of downplaying CGI and talking about practical effects and which I love practical effects, especially, but I think it's so often it's a blend of the two that is really where the real best stuff happens.
You're a filmmaker?
Trying to be, yeah.
It's you have a new movie are there any visual effects shots?
There will be. We did a lot of practical work, but it will be enhanced with visual effects.
Yes.
With some computer generated stuff.
Yes, and everyone knows I'm a big animation fan. So
yes.
this was a big thrill for me.
Yeah.
And I love Todd standing up for that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so Todd is amazing. He worked on the prequels. He's working on what are we calling these new Star Wars movies? The sequel trilogy.
Yes.
He's working on the theme park ride. He's, he's amazing. He's done it all.
Yeah.
So we've been trying to schedule this for probably a year, and it finally happened. I don't know how he had an hour and a half to talk to us, because he's literally working on Skywalker right now.
Yes. And he worked on the park, too. The new ride.
Yeah, the Rise of the Resistance, yeah. So I don't know how he had the time, but we're so thankful.
Well, that's why it took us months to...
That's true.
It took us a long time. We've been talking about this on the show for so long, talking to Todd. We finally got to do it, and it did not disappoint. No. He was great. So I'm sure you'll enjoy it as well.
We have any bookkeeping we need to do before this?
Yeah, there was a couple things.
All right. I'm ready for it.
A couple things. So our good friend Thomas Jeffroy pointed out that in MI2, in the closing credits, they misspelled Luther's name.
Yeah.
They misspelled his last name as Luther Strickle instead of Luther Stickle. So shame on MI2.
Another black eye for MI2.
Unless maybe it's one of Luther's aliases.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe Luther Stickle's alias is Luther Strickle.
Yeah.
Not the best.
Really throwing him off on that one.
Yeah, throws him off the scent.
Yeah. I could not believe that.
Yeah, that was pretty bad. We posted that on Instagram and Twitter, and thank you to Thomas for pointing that out.
# justice for Luther.
Yeah. That was that was pretty bad.
It was pretty bad. Yeah, that's worth mentioning.
The other thing I wanted to bring up is just that we want to do a video games episode.
We do.
And we wanted to just prompt everybody out there, if you had any memories or experiences playing certain Mission Impossible video games, please email us, tweet at us, Instagram message us, whatever you want, however, get in touch, because every couple months we come across a new video game that we didn't even know about.
Yeah.
Yesterday I came across, or maybe it was a few days ago, a GIF, I don't know how to pronounce it, of
a mobile game.
A mobile game that I had. It was an MI3 video
right.
game, and I was like, "What is this?" So I just tweeted it out and said, "Does anyone know what this video game is?"
Yeah.
And a few people answered and said it was like a Nokia mobile game in the mid 2000s.
And then we found.
And then I found someone sent us an emulator.
Yeah.
Which is so cool. We haven't played it yet, but we will. And I just wanted to, for our preparation for it. Because there's so many weird little games everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, I know there's a Rogue Nation mobile game that I actually have on my phone and is still available.
Okay, I gotta download it.
It's really just a sniper game, but it's still cool.
Well, and the Lego
Dimensions
Lego
game,
Dimensions,
which used actual dialogue from the first movie, right?
Yeah, and I have those figures somewhere, the little toys. Yeah.
So we're going to do our video games episode. We've been trying to find a good person to come on the show, but we might just do it ourselves.
Yeah.
But any suggestions for that as well?
If you know anybody co-host,
any other podcasts of a video game that is their video game expert?
We're not the most versed in video games.
No. But we'll do our best if we can't find anybody.
Charles spent a good 6 months trying to pawn off this weird emulator on me that he got for Christmas. I don't know
What was
where that is
Oh,
now. It was
oh,
like
that
an
was
Atari or something.
Oh yeah, it had like all these old Atari games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nobody wanted it. But anyway, not to bring up an old wound, but yes.
Yeah, but that's about it.
Yeah, okay.
So
All right, well, enjoy Todd Vaziri.
Enjoy Todd and enjoy this wonderful music from Kevin Blumenfeld.
And we'll be back afterwards to wrap things up. All right, well, this is we're kind of in we're doing like a month of visual effects episodes, sort of, right?
Yeah, more than a month.
More than a month.
Depending on how long we talk today, but...
Yeah, Todd, we talked to a young... Well, he's not young anymore. He's a very established visual effects artist.
I think you know him, Stu Maschwitz.
Oh, yeah. Love Stu.
We just talked to Stu earlier this week, or last week.
Yeah, and he was telling us about how he was a fresh-faced CalArts graduate, and his first movie was the first Mission Impossible. So we got a lot of really cool stories.
It seems like the timeline worked out that he kind of left ILM when you jumped on or something. Is that right? I mean, he was on the first prequel.
We had a slight bit of overlap. I think on episode 2, perhaps.
Oh, okay.
Because that's when I was hired for episode 2.
Yeah, so we're kind of doing a lot of ILM talk lately.
Yeah,
which is
great.
awesome. We've always loved ILM's work
Yes.
so much throughout all the years.
Yeah, I'm obsessed with animation too. So we were just watching Edge of Tomorrow was on TBS or something out there, and it was man, the stuff you guys did in that.
Wait, Edge of Tomorrow.
Edge of Tomorrow, also known as
Live, Die, Repeat.
Live, Die, Repeat.
Always kill.
Live, Die, Repeat.
Always don't forget to kill and get a title that everybody can agree on.
Yeah.
I love that movie. I don't think ILM did any work on that, but
are you sure?
I'll take the credit.
Yeah, take the credit. Take the credit.
Well, if they didn't, we'll cut this part out.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, we're here with Todd Vaziri. We're not here with him.
Well, how do you pronounce your name? Sorry.
Vaziri.
Sorry.
That's all right.
And Todd, you're an ILM effects artist. You have worked on a lot of the Star Wars movies.
A lot of Marvel movies. Another Brad Bird movie, which we're going to ask you about, among many others. But you worked on Mission Impossible 3 and Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, which is what we're talking about tonight. So, I mean, we're over the moon. I don't know how you feel about things.
I feel great. I've been listening to a lot of episodes and having Elswit on and Brad Bird on. I'm like, you were finally building to me.
Yes,
it's really great. So
all this time.
I'm glad you hit that zenith.
Yeah. Paul, when we talked to Paul Hirsch as we were leaving his house, he said, "Oh, you guys have talked to Todd, all right?"
Mm-hmm.
And then we said, "Yeah, we got it. We're talking to him. Don't worry about it." Yeah, we're here.
But in all honesty, actually, we are very excited to talk to you,
especially because we've been trying to talk to you for months.
For a long time, and I love your you're on Twitter. What is your handle on Twitter? We highly recommend you follow Todd on Twitter because he has great stuff that he posts all the time.
Just T Vaziri, Tvaziri.
Yeah. Yes, I especially liked when you told somebody to fuck off when they were complaining about the costumes in Endgame.
Oh, that doesn't sound like me. Yeah.
Not in so many words, but, you were emphasizing the craft and the artistry that went into such a decision. And...
Well, it was amazing that the time travel suits were all CGI. They were all done in post.
Right.
But if that wasn't pointed out to anybody, nobody would have ever known.
Yeah.
Because they were so good.
Yeah.
And it flies in the face of the trope of, I could spot all the CGI. I always know when they're using computers, and it always feels fake to me. And we have big-time movie directors who come in and go, I just hate CGI. Even this day and age, they come in and say, just CG, I just don't buy it. You guys have to finally, in 2019, prove it to me that CG can be believable on screen. It just doesn't have that warmth and texture. And then you get something like that thing in like you pointed out in Endgame where the suits were all CG all the time, or Black Panther's suit in every single shot, or Spider-Man's suit in every single shot is CG. It's CG all the time, and you would never know unless somebody pointed out to you. So, I mean, I hate it when I'm on Twitter and I feel like I have to be the measured, calm voice of advocacy for the visual effects world, because it gets really tiresome of people who are passionate about movies.
Yes,
But
I think you were sparring with our other one-time guest, Patrick Willems.
Two-time guest.
Two-time
now.
guest now, yeah.
oh, I love him. He's great.
Yeah, no, but it was great. The back and forth was really great. So
Well, like you've pointed out, like, a lot of people talk about Mad Max Fury Road and how amazing it is, which it is absolutely amazing. And people point to that movie as one where it's all practical, but there was so much work that they enhanced the practical with visual effects. And you point out those instances where it's, it's a marriage of both practical and visual and CGI, and that's really where a lot of the magic happens is in that.
Well, and everybody likes to think that there's some kind of war going on between our two crafts, and it absolutely is not. We need each other. We need stunts. We need the editors and the physical effects, the floor effects, the makeup effects, animatronics, and CG digital effects. We all work together to make the best movie we can. There, from my perspective, and at least for ILM, there's no turf war going on. We all are looking. We're the first to say in pre-production, oh no, you want to build that. If the actors are going to be working with it, or if it's something the actors are going to be handling and picking up and throwing around, and it doesn't have to have that much articulation, let's build. You guys should build it. You should not do it in CG for these 5 reasons. We're going to be the first to say that, and any effects facility will be any effects supervisor will be the same way. So yeah.
Well, let's get to the real meat of the matter. You ready, Charles? Your hat's off. You ready?
Hats off. I'm ready to go.
So what was your sort of relationship with Mission Impossible before you started working on Mission Impossible 3?
Well, I think, I'm a Gen Xer, so I was not around when the original series was on the air.
You weren't working. The original TV series.
The original
yes,
TV series. Yeah. But I think my introduction would probably have been the theme song. It's so incredibly ubiquitous. And sort of like Star Trek, I didn't really get into the old episodes. And what got me into Mission Impossible as a fan of the whole franchise was the 1988 reboot with Peter Graves.
Wow.
The one with the writer's strike. Have you guys done an episode on this?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to go back and listen to that.
We did a whole breakdown of the first few episodes.
Yeah, we're going to return to it when things get real slow.
I mean, what an amazing...
so Australian.
The fact that it existed because of the writer's strike is absolutely phenomenal. But, okay, it had Peter Graves, it had the theme song, and it had Jane Badler, who was on V, and I'm like, well, okay, I'm sold. So that's how I got into Mission Impossible, and that was, 1988 or 89 or something? And I was just a fan. I started working in visual effects after the first Mission Impossible movie, and by the second one, I was probably at ILM by then. And then when it came time for Mission Impossible 3, and I had heard that we got the show, I was like, oh gosh, I got to get on that. And we had a really great crew, visual effects supervisor and compositing supervisor, and it was, these are folks that I had worked with before. We just rolled off of Roger Guyette and Pat Tubach were the VFX soup and the compositing supervisor. And I think Mission Impossible 3 was my first lead title on a movie. And it was a really good marriage of content and our skills. And it was just really terrific. And especially because it wasn't, so many of the movies that we get at ILM are big, epic, spectacle-based, fantasy-based, crazy planets exploding and creatures. This was a movie where ostensibly you're not even supposed to notice the visual effects. It's supposed to be relatively invisible, other than just crazy-ass action sequences. So those don't come through our doors very often, and whenever one of those comes into ILM, I'm like, I got to get on it, and it was terrific.
Yeah, I mean, your sort of CV is filled with jobs like that. It seems like, things like Lone Ranger, which is not very showy, but has beautiful effects and things like that. But so what were the sort of key sequences that you were working on in Mission Impossible for people who might not notice them?
I did stuff all over the movie, but most of my focus was on the bridge sequence, the bridge extraction sequence.
Awesome.
The Chesapeake Bay Bridge. And it was me. I was in leading comp, and David Hisanaga was leading CG. So we have the two leads, and then we kind of oversee all of the things that have to happen for that sequence. We usually the leads usually handle like the biggest like look development shots, which is like the hero shots where we want to get those out of the way first and get approval on those shots first and tools and techniques, and then everybody else can disseminate from there. But I did a little bit on the helicopter scene, and I did a little stuff here and there all around the entire movie. But the bridge sequence is where I spend most of my time.
And correct me if I'm wrong, from what we have done, we know we did a making of MI3 episode and have studied all these movies extensively. The bridge sequence was shot, other than a couple of second unit probably shots that were done on the actual Chesapeake Bay Bridge, most of it was shot in a field in Calabasas, California, where a bridge was built over grass, like a few feet above grass.
Yeah, it's absolutely phenomenal.
And then ILM completely put in all of the water.
Yeah, it basically, no actors, if I got this right, no actors were ever on the real Chesapeake Bay Bridge, and no first unit stuff was ever shot there. It was all second units, some vehicles. So they had that establishing shot of the truck, the armored truck going through with all the caravan of cars. And then ILM has sent a unit with a helicopter and over on a boat, taking a ton of reference photography and to use as textures and build matte paintings from them. And everything else was photographed. All the stunts, all the actors and everything was filmed on that hill where that piece of highway and bridge structure was built. It actually is quite amazing because they were able to get a ton of photography in camera, no visual effects at all, as long as the camera was about like 4 or 5 feet off the ground, because you had those railings. The railings were opaque. And remind me to tell you a story about the railings in just a second. The railings were opaque, and you could shoot all your actors that way, so basically eye level and below, and you'd have blue sky, and you would be none the wiser. It just can't be a very smoggy day in Calabasas. And in fact, I think we had to tweak the skies just a little bit to get really nice, beautiful baby blue skies on some of those shots. But then if the camera ever went above 5 feet, that's when ILM came involved. All the big, like what look like helicopter shots, they are real helicopter shots, but they're shooting down on that little partial highway set. And then we had to fill it all in with water and skies and Chesapeake Bay horizon. And then later, when the part of the bridge gets blown up, we had to build that piece of there was a giant set piece of that gash in the road, but then we had to extend it a lot. So it was basically like as much as Ethan Hunt is hanging off of that from his tippy fingertips when he's holding on to his toes, that's all set piece, and then everything below that is an extension that we did in CG.
And the drone was animated?
The drone was all CG. Yeah, there wasn't anything. There was the practical explosion when it hits the bridge itself, but everything about that was computer generated. Yeah.
And was the water a matte painting, or was the water a CGI?
The water almost entirely was photography. I had to review, many countless hours of water photography, so it was mostly photography. I think we had to sneak in a couple CG pieces of water for tiny little patches, just because the angles just weren't working right. But we worked really, really hard to try to photograph as many angles of empty water at Chesapeake Bay from a 360-degree viewpoint, so we can get all like lighting angles, shooting into the sun, shooting away from the sun, to be able to just put them into the shots. So it's mostly separately photographed water plates.
Now, we've heard J.J. Abrams did one shot VFX in this movie. Do you know where it is, or was he just lying to the people for all these years?
He's definitely not lying.
Okay.
And he did, I think he did a couple shots.
Yeah, I think he says that in the commentary. He did a couple.
Yeah,
But he wouldn't say which ones.
And one of them was kind of funny because it was a very the first one he wanted to get. If I'm remembering this right, it was he's like, okay, this shot, and I'm not going to talk about too much detail. It was a very hard paint out issue where you had to go in and do frame by frame painting. And he's like, oh yeah, let's do this one. And our paint supervisor Beth D'Amato looked at that and goes, oh. No, I was going to do this one myself, and it was going to probably take like 3 or 4 days for me to get it right. And he's like, no, I'll do it. And, that was over. That experiment was over very fast. But,
was it the blood on Cruz's face from the?
It may have been. I'm not entirely sure.
Wow, you got to give us credit for even putting that together.
I know. I've been listening to your episodes.
Okay.
But he definitely did a couple quick shots here and there in the movie.
That's amazing. What a talent, that guy.
Yeah.
And then you worked with him again on 2 more times on Star Trek.
Yeah.
Well, and Star Wars. I forget.
I did. Yeah, that's Star Wars movie, and I did a little bit on Super 8. So I'd like to say that I'm his lucky charm. I don't think he would say that, but
I think you're the. Yeah, it sounds like you're the first one he calls when he gets a project.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So there's a shot in the bridge sequence where Cruz jumps over a gap in the bridge, and then he almost falls, and he's holding on to the bridge, trying not to fall into the water. Was that all done in that field in Calabasas?
Yeah. As far as I know, there was a. Was there a slight extension where they built a small piece because the camera had to get really, really low?
It looks up at the bridge.
Yeah,
so
I think
like
they did
seemed
some inserts.
like that was a special piece of bridge that must have been higher.
Yeah,
than the
was
bridge.
that. I don't think that was on the hill, but all the stuff looking down, I think that was all there because, I mean it's just as you guys have heard the stories. I mean, the imagination involved in doing a sequence like this, they got so much more bang for the buck for doing this. I mean, at the time, if anybody saw you building this mini highway out on a hill, you'd be like, "What are you guys doing? This is crazy!" But it ultimately got so much production value out of it, like millions and millions of dollars. That it also just logistically. Absolutely, positively impossible to film this on the real Chesapeake Bay Bridge, especially with all the stunts and closing it down. It just was not in the cards. So it's a really cool sequence.
Were there any difficulties in terms of how Dan Mendel shot the actual photography? And also, Charles and I love hearing about how much of a pain in the ass anamorphic is when dealing with visual effects.
Yeah, anamorphic. Let's see. That was 2006. So that was right around the start of my anamorphic streak. I think I was on 6 or 7 anamorphic streaks in a row after not having worked on one for 10 years beforehand or something. I hated it at first. I'm like, these lenses are so nuts. Our layout people are just, it is so hard to correct for lens distortion and get good match moves out of it. But I've really grown to love it. And what it forced me to do was to really dive into the research and look at as many anamorphic movies as I could and look at all of the particular characteristics of anamorphic lenses and how they are revealed on screen. Granted the flares and everything, but all of the depth of field, the chromatic aberration, and the vignetting, all those things that you get. Yes, we had the real footage to study from Mission Impossible 3, but I just dove in and I watched every single anamorphic movie I could, and I would capture as many clips as I could and showed, okay, here's what we got to do. See this little thing that was in Die Hard? We got to use that here. This little aperture reflection flares are different in anamorphic movies than on spherical movies. And in addition to that, these movies, when most of the movie is filmed with the anamorphic lenses, but for certain sequences and when we know it's going to be a visual effects shot, if we can, we will switch to spherical lenses. But then we need to add the anamorphic characteristics back into it. like my shot of the of Tom Cruise getting blown off of his feet. Those were all shot, I think, either Vistavision or Super 35. I can't exactly remember, but they were shot with the spherical lenses, so that ultimately, when I would make that widescreen frame, I would have to reintroduce all of the anamorphic characteristics of using those lenses.
You're talking about the shot where they had a harness and pulled him into the car as
Yeah.
so you
That was your shot?
you're saying
That was my shot. Yep.
Did they film Tom Cruise with Vistavision, or was it just the elements
Yes.
that you added? So they shot that?
No,
Okay.
no. Tom was filmed. It was actually like the stereo rig, so that Roger and the camera department developed, where there was actually two cameras with a slight bit of overlap on a dolly to give us basically like almost super widescreen, but still allowing us to use spherical lenses. That's how badly we want to use spherical lenses.
Wow.
So one pass was filmed with Tom doing the stunt. And then it was poor man's motion control, because that camera is dollying backwards, and it's also stereo, or not. I'm calling it stereo, but it was just two cameras side by side with overlap. And then another
So it's
pass
like
was filmed
two
with
Vistavision
the,
cameras side by side.
I wish I remembered if it was Vista or Super 35. I can't remember.
But wow, okay.
And then another pass was filmed with the camera dollying backwards of the truck exploding. And then that was the photography that was used for that plate and for that shot. And you asked about like Dan Medell's camera work, and the whole design aesthetic of this movie was very long lens, very shaky, like point of view type stuff. I mean, the movie is. There's a lot of point of view stuff in the movie where you're basically just following Ethan and doing what, you're alongside Ethan. So whenever he's in a very, chaotic situation, the camera work reflects that. It doesn't necessarily know what it's supposed to look at. So it's kind of always looking for a better composition and shaking around. So in all of our visual effects work, some of that stuff was filmed a lot more conventionally, because you don't want to necessarily have all that built-in camera motion for visual effects work, because you need to have a lot of flexibility to move things around and take bits of this photography and use it elsewhere. So part of my job, like in a shot like that, was to reintroduce the feeling of Mendel's camera work, the actual operation, into visual effects shots. And that what I thought was a lot of fun. So like in that shot of Tom getting blown off his feet, that was filmed. If you just looked at the photography, it's just a dolly backwards. It looks like almost like a Kubrick shot. It's very steady, because that's how we want. We want the most pristine photography that we can get. And then later, I added all the crash zoom and the zoom out and all the camera work and everything that would hopefully fit in with the rest of the sequence, because you just didn't want to cut to this big effect shot that stylistically didn't feel like the rest of the sequence. He wanted just like it was shot right alongside everything else.
So you gave it a handheld feel to it.
Right.
That's awesome.
Just making your job more complicated. I understand. So you watched the 80s show, but were you kind of psyched to be on this team that brought Mission Impossible back to ILM? Because their work on the first movie still takes our breath away every time we watch it. I mean, it's just so great.
And it was even more mind-blowing talking to Stu about it.
Yeah, there's some really incredible work in that movie. I love the exterior portion of the train chase is just phenomenal from a sequence and shot design point of view. It's just so great. We were thrilled that Mission Impossible came back to ILM.
So were we.
Yeah,
And
we want him to come back. 7 and 8. Come on, let's put the bid in.
And we've worked with Tom in a lot of movies, and he is something else. He is an absolute force of nature, and I know you're going to try to extract some Tom Cruise stories out of me. No time like the present. So
was he involved at all?
He was involved. Well, he was one of the producers of the movie, and he was involved with some of the big stuff like that. The shot of him getting blown off his feet. I mean, that was a tremendous stunt that he did, and it was my duty to not mess with any of his photography, like his performance and his stunt work in that shot. I didn't change one pixel of it. I didn't remove a single frame. I didn't do any morphing or warping of anything to speed him up or slow him down. I wanted to preserve that, and we knew that was very important. So on a couple of the early reviews, he was in on it with JJ, and because we made a special version of it for the first trailer. And if you ever put those two shots back to back, the one that's in the movie and the trailer version, they're very different. I wasn't quite done with the shot just yet when it hit the trailer, but in addition, when he gets hit and smashes into the car, the UAV, there's like a couple beats, and then the UAV flies by.
Yeah.
But for the trailer version, they had a very set length that they wanted the shot to be. So they asked, can we get the UAV to fly by much, 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 much earlier? And so we made a special version of that shot where the UAV flies by a lot earlier, and the camera move has to reflect that. Like I wanted the camera operator to obviously be framed on Tom, and then the UAV comes, and it just barely, tilts up to catch it because like the operator knew it was coming, but it didn't know exactly when it was coming. So it was really tricky choreography to get all that to work for the teaser. And then we had to do it again separately with different timing for the real shot. So go ahead and put those back to back and see what the differences are.
Yeah, well, we're going to be doing that.
But he's involved. I mean, and his ideas are always great, and he is incredibly supportive on every level. Like John Knoll calls him like one of the greatest physical actors that he's ever worked with. And he's like, he called him human motion control. If you get him to do a particular action once, and you say, okay, you have to do that, like ripping your mask off or doing something like that, or being on wires and having to do all these crazy motions, he will do it every single time. And it's just, it's incredible.
Wow.
Wow.
Do you have any more questions about MI3?
Well, I just wanted to say that the shot that you did with the on the bridge with him getting tossed into the car, it's such an impressive shot. It's such an iconic shot now.
Yeah.
That, I mean, anytime they do a montage of the series, that is a heavily featured shot every time.
Yeah, it's when we worked on the shot, I didn't know it was going to be the cornerstone of their marketing. So
Yeah.
It was a really, really hard shot, and I'm really glad about how it turned out, and people seem to like it.
Were you involved at all in the shot? There's a shot as part of the Vatican sequence where Jonathan Rhys-Meyers shoots a little, I forget what it is, some kind of tracking device thing or whatever it is. He shoots it into, I think it's a tracking device thing. He shoots it into a sewer cap.
Yep.
And there's a little, when it hits, someone at ILM, I assume, added a little hair in there, like a
that
hair
little,
got caught
yeah.
in it.
Well, I think it's
so awesome.
I think it's supposed to be a little antenna.
Oh, really?
Okay.
I think so, and I'm almost positive that was one of our shots. Yeah.
Yeah, that's just so cool. I didn't realize it was supposed to be an antenna. I thought it was like a hair got trapped in there, and it was just a little extra detail they were putting in there. But it's supposed to be a little antenna. That's cool.
There you go.
Either way, it's like, I mean, it looks so real. It looks great.
We did do some miniatures for the movie. You do know about this?
Oh
No.
no! Tell us.
Ooh. The helicopter chase at the beginning of the movie. Almost all of that is real helicopters flying through that windmill farm. But some things that couldn't be done with the stunt pilots and everything, that's where ILM came involved. And when that van explodes at the beginning of the sequence and the helicopter that flies through it is this wonderful miniature helicopter that was built by the ILM model shop. And I really wanted to be there when they filmed it, and I was there. I was able to go there, and it was filmed over 2 nights.
Oh wow!
And this, how long was that thing? Maybe like 8 or 9 feet long model of a helicopter on a rig that had to fly through an explosion. Now, if you've ever seen any of these miniature explosions, I mean, we're talking a very large miniature explosion. I don't even want to call it a miniature. It's something like, I don't know, 30 feet wide or something like that.
Wow.
But those fireballs, they ignite and they're done. They're over so fast. So in order to have the helicopter fly through it, it had to also be on a motion control rig alongside of it, and it had to fly through it so fast to get the scale right because they're filming at high speed and everything like that. And it was absolutely remarkable to watch the ILM model shop build this thing and photograph this thing because those rotors were going on the helicopter. And I tell you, when those rotors started going, you're like, oh my gosh, this is like, and before they would roll action and ignite the pyro, you're like, so this is almost dangerous. This is so amazing. And then they would go, okay, 3, 2, 1, action, and the miniature would start moving, and then the explosion would happen. It would be a big giant explosion and bang, and it would go right through, and it's like, wait, that was a blink. It's over, and you'd go look at the video assist, and you'd see it in slow motion. It's like, oh yeah, it looks great, and that's one of the highlights of my ILM career, to be able to watch that stuff be filmed over the course of 2 nights. It was really, really stunning, and it ended up being like, I think maybe 2 shots or 1 shot of it coming through the fireball, and we had to add a lot of extra fire that it like pushes out and kind of and leaves behind. And then we did another miniature shoot of the actual windmill blade hitting the bad guy's helicopter. Yeah. And I did the 2 shots. I did the 1 shot of it getting hit in profile, and then of it falling toward camera. I did that one. And then Mike Conti comped the one of it landing on the ground. But like, there's so many things in that sequence that help give it scale, because these windmills are so much bigger than you expect. They're like skyscrapers. And
I assume that's why you had the sheep in there to like.
That's exactly right. The sheep, and then it hitting and falling on one of them falling on a truck, which we have at ILM. We have the miniature truck smashed. It's on display. If you go on a tour at ILM, you can see the.
Is that in the walkway, the long?
That's in the
corridor?
Skyway. Yeah, that's right.
Oh man, my phone's camera was malfunctioning the day I was at ILM for some movie.
That's not a good day to have a broken
Rogue
camera.
One. No,
man.
not a good day for it to foul up. But I now I have to go back and look closely for that truck.
Do you have any pictures that you could share of any of those miniatures by chance?
I shot video, and I keep hoping ILM publicity will end up using it in a piece. Like, I even cut together this whole thing, and I recorded every take with my camcorder and everything. So I would contact ILM.
We got it.
We'll see if they will inevitably definitely tell us no.
Yes. But those scale cues, I'm glad you mentioned those scale cues, because it helps sell like what, and JJ and Roger and everybody involved with the movie is so good about setting up the geography of a sequence beforehand and then letting the action take place. And so you know how big things are. You know exactly where everybody's going to be, and that's what makes it more exciting, because you're not like. The audience isn't confused. Like when they go to grab the rabbit's foot, do you know how many times do they actually just say the whole plan as lines of dialogue? They just say the whole plan, so that when it happens and things go wrong, you're right there with them, as opposed to every single scene being like a hit to the head and being disoriented and like, oh, the audience isn't going, well, what's going on? I don't know what's going on.
Right.
You always know what's going on.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about, there's a shot in Shanghai. Was ILM involved in all of that? So there's an amazing shot of Tom Cruise on top of the building, and the camera moves in and circles around him and Ving Rhames as they're talking. And the entirety of Shanghai is around them. However, as far as we understand, that shot was done at Universal Studios here in Hollywood.
Yep. At the top floor of the parking garage.
Yes.
And that's what they were on. And
they
they built the whole set piece of that building, the roof on that. And then he really did that jump again. that shot of him jumping off, yeah, he's on wires and everything, but that's him jumping off of a like 3-4 story building. And then the profile shot of him in slow motion flying through the air, that's him flying through the air. We didn't want to touch a single pixel of that. It is against a green screen, and then that's a completely synthetic environment of Shanghai. But I mean, that's a tremendous marriage of, and there's such an incredible, the way that the shot of him jumping off is so well designed, because it starts with a close up of his face and you see him concentrating, and then without any cutting at all, he turns around and he just jumps off the edge. And they were really clever in hiding the fact that even in the movie he's on a wire. But you never see the wire or anything like that because, if you were a spectator right there and you were just plopped in that situation, you'd be like, oh my God, that guy's just jumping off a building. I mean, it's meant for your POV. And then when he lands on that other slanted roof, that's a giant set piece that they built, but it's not the entire roof of that thing. So when he's sliding down, he is sliding down that real set piece, but he's sliding down that same, 15-foot run over and over and over and over again, and surrounded by green screen. And we replaced everything. We made an entire virtual city behind there, and we were able to create shots from scratch. And that is a great marriage of intense practical shoot and visual effects alongside it.
That's amazing.
Like all those baseballs that get I was just remembering, like, the baseballs that get launched onto the other roof. In real life, if you launched a baseball, even if you had a spotlight on it, you would, at the scale of the shots that you see in the movie, you would never see the baseball. So we're like, okay, how are we going to do this? We're lighting these things with like nuclear powered lights, and we're scaling up the baseballs like 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times. We just, we had to figure out a way in CG to tell the story and make you think it's a baseball, and yet you still got to be able to read that it's a baseball, and you got to see it. And how is this all going to work? And I don't know. Those kind of problems are just, I love those kind of problems.
Well,
that's so cool.
Should we move on to Ghost Protocol?
Yeah, is there anything else from MI3 that you remember that you wanted to
I'm looking at my notes. You know about R2-D2 in it, right?
What?
Oh,
no.
You guys call yourself a Mission Impossible podcast.
Mission Impossible and R2-D2 and droids, yeah. And you wanted to talk about the columns too.
The railing.
The railings.
Oh yeah. That's a good one. When they were all done filming, Roger snagged a few pieces of the railing to bring back to ILM, and he gave me one of the struts of the railing. So it's sitting at my desk along with a fake piece of corrugated, like a steel, and it's just made out of plastic. The whole thing's made out of like plywood and plastic, and that sits at my desk today. And I'll try to take a picture of it and send it to you guys so you can throw it on the website.
Yeah, and so tell us about R2-D2.
Yeah,
one of our favorite droids, I think.
R2,
speaking for both of us,
JJ loves R2, and he wanted to figure out a way to sneak it into his movies. And it's in Super 8, and it's in Star Trek, and it's in Star Trek Into Darkness. But we were able to sneak him into a shot in Mission Impossible 3. It's at the helicopter chase sequence early on when the whole building explodes behind Ethan. There's a down angle shot of Ethan and Kerry Russell on the top of the truck that's driving away. On the far right, it looks like a trash heap. If you look really carefully through the explosion, you could see R2-D2 in there in the trash heap.
Okay, we're gonna look.
Wow.
We're looking literally right now.
Wait, it's before Kerry Russell dies,
it's
or after?
when they get on the.
It's before, when they're on
the
top
truck.
of the truck driving away, and it's a down. We're on the roof looking down at them pulling away. It's a very, very fast shot right after the warehouse explodes.
Okay.
During the explosion.
Oh, I see it. I see him.
There he is. Wow. Yeah.
Especially when the flame lights up the whole, it lights up the whole frame when the flame comes in on the left side of the frame. On the right, next to like this scaffolding thing or whatever, you can see the little distinct features of R2-D2, like in ruins down there.
Yeah.
Now you
Poor
got to look
R2.
for him in Super 8 and Star Trek and Star Trek Into Darkness, and if you really look hard, we sneaked him into Force Awakens too. So he's
Wow, that'll be the hardest one.
I'm looking
So-
at my notes, and let's see, was there anything else I wanted to talk? I mean, I don't know, just rewatching it again for the first time in a few years. The editing of this movie is so tremendous, and I know you guys have talked about the movie a lot, but I just like the way the movie opens with the interrogation, and then how it plays again later in the movie, and how it's a tremendous editing exercise to be able to have to tell almost two different stories using almost the same footage, and the same event is serving two completely different purposes in the middle of the movie. I don't know. Marianne and Mary did such a tremendous job on that whole.
Yeah, we're
whole
talking
thing.
to them soon. One of them is
Hopefully.
working on some little art house movie. I'm not sure what. And yeah, so in between Mission Impossible 3 and Ghost Protocol, you worked on some pretty amazing stuff. I think we can say that, including your first completely animated feature with Rango.
Yeah.
What was it like coming back to Mission Impossible? Did you feel like, oh, I'm like such a more accomplished artist now?
No.
And I'm real. No, okay.
God,
All right.
no, I got worse. I devolved, and it took a few weeks of training to get back up. No, when John Knoll, and not only Mission Impossible, I heard Mission Impossible was coming back to ILM, which I was super thrilled because it was such a tremendous experience. But that John Knoll was going to be involved, and that I would be serving as compositing supervisor. Have we talked about compositing? Like, what is compositing, or do you?
I mean, Charles and I have talked. We haven't maybe talked about it on the show. So if you want to give people a little sort of rundown of what that is, you're in the middle of compositing right now, aren't you, on your movie?
Not quite yet, no.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I think you'll probably do the best job of explaining what that is to our audience. So go ahead.
Well, there's many stages of digital production, visual effects production, and something has to be animated, something has to be modeled and textured and animated and lit and rendered, and then the process of bringing together all of the elements, all of the visual effects elements, and that includes the photography, any rendered elements, any animation, putting all of that together as a composite. That's what a compositor does, is puts it all together and smooths out the edges and works on color matching and adds the shadows and does all of these things. And it's basically the last step before it gets printed out to film and goes to the color timers. So it's a very important part of the job, and especially for these kind of movies where there's a ton of photography, and everything that we do that's CG, or if it's 2D, like where we're mixing plates, it all has to blend together. And part of the compositor's job is to make sure that everything blends together and looks like it just came out right out of the camera.
Well, that seems fairly simple.
I'm actually very curious because I saw, you've posted a few times about the Dubai sequence in Ghost Protocol, which we worship and is part of the reason why we're obsessed with this series, that sequence alone. But I've seen you post on Twitter a little video of the shot of Cruise going out for the first time, that amazing shot. Yeah. And I've just been waiting to ask you, what was the work that you did in the Burj Khalifa sequence with Cruise on the side of the building?
Well, it's a combination of stuff, and the combination of stuff is kind of the mantra for the movie, because there were so many different. Because I was compositing supervisor on the movie, I was intimately involved with all of the different ways the film was photographed, and I think we broke a new ILM record for the different types of formats that were used for any movie on Mission Impossible 4, which made my life a living hell. It was I keep laughing at it. We had, because various sequences were shot with IMAX cameras, but there's two different flavors of IMAX, 15 perf and 8 perf. We shot in Vistavision, we shot in Super 35, we shot most of the movie was shot in anamorphic 35, and then some stuff was shot with digital cameras. So it was a real soup of stuff, a lot of different formats. And ultimately, when you see it in the theater, you should hopefully not be thinking about that at all, and it should all just blend together.
Yeah, it's
So
seamless.
the Dubai sequence was a amazing combination of Tom actually on the side of the Burj Khalifa with tons of amazing safety and stunt people making sure that nothing bad would happen. But that is him on the 108th floor or whatever on the side of the building with a ton of safety equipment and wires off of him. And then also above him is the rig that's holding all that stuff. So there's several windows above him at any point when he's actually out on the edge of the Burj. All of that, of course, needs to be removed later. There's him actually climbing, and then there's a set piece that they built in Vancouver where it was like 20 feet off the ground, where they would shoot up. They built like this giant side of the building where they could shoot up and get actual blue sky and get a lot of stuff in camera that way. But they couldn't get the camera. If the camera went too close to his eye level, the building is super reflective. You can't have downtown Vancouver reflected in the building. So they can only use that for angled shots. And then that same set piece was used for blue screen shots. So it's a combination of all of them. And even now I look at the sequence and I'm like, I have to like really remember which shots are which, because it's an absolutely genius combination. It's kind of like you never rely on any one technique too much, because if you put your finger on that button, people will start to figure out the gag. It's kind of like the hoverboard in Back to the Future 2. If you look at any shot one after another, it's a different technique of how to make the hoverboard work in every single shot. So your brain can't keep up with what's going on. So there's a little bit of that going on in the Dubai sequence. So in a shot of him, the slowly walking out that front door and then navigating himself around, that's Tom in Dubai with the I think it's the 15 perf IMAX camera behind him. And it's not only amazing what he had to do, but what the operators and that move had to happen, and to light it all so that it would make that you could actually see that it's Tom on the shadow side of the building. It was a crazy amount of choreography and craft involved. So when the shot starts, you see just his feet, but he's all rigged up, and he slowly, the timing had to be right so that you could truly establish that that's Tom. You get his profile, you see Dubai out there. Dubai skyline is blasted with sunlight. How are we going to do the exposure balance? Because he's in shadows, and we want to be able to see him and the skyline at the same time, which is a real tricky proposition. He needs to go around, and he does all that move. We didn't change a single pixel of him. There's a ton of removals on there where whenever he turns and he gets onto the side of the building, he's being suspended. There's the wires and the rig that is attached to his costume, his specially made costume, so that there could be easy ways to, stop the paint at a certain point. But remember, the side of this building is reflective. And there's a whole other set of wires in the reflection. And then there's parts of the building which are like right angles, and you see reflections there as well. And you sometimes see reflections of reflections as well.
Wow.
So there's a ton of stuff going on just the climbing sequences. And it was really... Yeah, go ahead.
Were you also enhancing at all the things on the ground, like cars and things? So that's all just real?
For those shots of the real Dubai, that's the real Dubai. And then for
those
other
tiny
shots,
cars in the background,
for other
super,
shots,
super tiny cars.
For the trailer, again, we had to do some special shots for the first trailer, and John Knoll and I each took on a shot of the blue screen where we had to create a matte painting for the ground of Dubai. So we both chose he had one shot, I had one shot, and we had to animate the traffic. Even though these were really short shots, we could not just have a still matte painting based on photography. We had to move the traffic. We had to make it alive. So we both use After Effects. So we were both using After Effects to animate little pieces of little cars. We cut out cars from other pieces of photography, and we animated highways. We animated 4-way stops, and then he would come by my desk, and I'd say, "Yeah, I just did this 4-way stop," and I have this one guy on the highway cutting off. I mean, we're all just do 2D animating like a bunch of kids. And I had this one guy cutting off another person in the slow lane. And he's like, "Oh yeah, that's a good idea. I'm going to try to do that." And we were passing back tips, tips and tricks. It was really, really fun. So some shots had animated backgrounds that were matte paintings, and then other shots were just straight up photography.
What a career. Putting us to shame.
Yes.
Just
Thanks for that, Todd.
thanks, Todd, for making us feel like garbage. But an amazing conversation.
What
and
a cool career to have. The
Yeah.
movies he's worked on. I mean, next week we get into more of some of the other projects he's done in his career, which is really cool to talk to him about. Steven Spielberg and Michael Bay and stuff. It's cool to hear stories from that, which you'll hear next week.
Michael Bay, and who else has he worked with extensively? Gore Verbinski.
Gore Verbinski, yep.
He did another Brad Bird movie.
Yeah.
But
So you'll
I
hear
love
about that next week.
I love his whole approach of just like wanting to work on the movies that aren't the showiest movies, but the ones that are the most challenging and the most sort of invisible.
Right.
Which I think 3 and 4. I mean, he was telling us stuff that we didn't know about.
Right.
So
yeah,
that's a testament to how sort of invisible this stuff was. But yeah, what a thrill.
Yeah.
If you need more thrills, sign up for that Patreon.
Yeah.
Woo!
You want some bonus interviews, bonus sneak previews, and commentaries for the various movies?
I was shocked when people were asking today, when's our commentary coming out for Ghost Protocol? The fact that anyone's listening to this is...
Actually, by the time this episode comes out, our Ghost Protocol commentary will most definitely be available.
Okay, great.
So we will have commentaries for 1 through 4 by this time, I think.
Awesome.
So you should sign up and get that.
Get it before we start having to dip into the old episodes and do commentary for those.
I think we can start doing commentaries for other stuff, too.
Just anything
Just
we see.
and random movies. We can prompt our Patreon subscribers to ask them what they'd like to hear us do.
Maybe we get Kevin in to do an bonus episode. I thought that would be kind of fun.
That'd be cool.
See where he is in the legal process.
Yeah.
With the lawsuit and everything.
Yeah, of course.
But also, obviously, like, subscribe, rate, review wherever you're listening to this. Reach out to us on whatever preferred platform you like to use and chat and give us ideas and let us know about stuff.
And going back to the Patreon, this episode is brought to you by Jeremy Dillon. And we
love Jeremy Dillon.
We do love Jeremy. Thank you so much for making this possible. And this was also mixed by Luke Burson.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, we'll be back next week with part 2 of Todd, right?
Yep.
All right.
Thanks again for listening, everyone. And before we go, another mission, should you choose to accept it. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. And remember that you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at LightTheFusePod and email us questions or comments at LightTheFusePodcasts@gmail.com. If you'd like to watch the original Mission Impossible television show, all 7 seasons are currently available to stream on Amazon Prime. This message will self-destruct in 5 seconds.